Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host,
Christopher Wells.
We appreciate all the love on our recent content. We recently did a live stream on Tuesday, so go check that out. We covered all the games prior to that date, and we don't really want to regurgitate too much from that content. So, we'll be starting today's content from all the events that happened Tuesday and afterwards. So again, check out that live stream. It was really fun. We had a bunch of, comments and people in there. It was a great time. We had a great time chatting with everyone. But yeah, before we get started with this content, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the OBT Podcast. But to kick this episode off, we've got to start at Tuesday, and that was, the first game was the New York Knicks against the Miami Heat. Miami Heat were away, and they didn't have Jimmy Butler, so they ended up losing this game. Knicks came away with the win, 111-105. RJ Barrett, he put up 24. Julius Randle had a great game. I think this is more of the game that you want to see from Julius Randle. If you're a Knicks fan, this is more of the Julius Randle that we know and not the one that, spawned in the Cleveland series. So, he had 25 points, 8 assists, and 12 rebounds. And Jalen Brunson had a really good game. I think this is the kind of game that you want to see him have on a nightly basis. He put up 30 points. I think that's very solid. Josh Hart off the bench, 14 points, 9 assists, 11 rebounds. Great rebounding guard. We were big fans of this move for them, and he definitely is contributing to their playoff success thus far. And then, just some minor buckets sprinkled down the bench from Hartenstein, but, he did play a really good, big role in, their hustle points or hustle plays, rebounds, things of that nature. And then Quentin Grimes had 3 points as well. Emmanuel Cookie, 6 points. Then you look at the Heat. They kind of came out of this game looking a little flat, in my opinion. Caleb Martin at 22. I think that's a good sign. That shows you that there are guys capable on this team that can score above 20 points. Gabe Vincent as well. I want to see more from Bam. I want to see him, in that 18 and 10 range, maybe 20 and 10. But, he had 15 points, 6 assists, and 8 rebounds. And then Kyle Lowry came out flat, in my opinion. I'd want to see him score at least 10, but, I'd want to see him around the 15-point range. I think that would help them get over the hump in a lot of these kinds of games where every point matters. Then Highsmith, 5 points. Cody Zeller, 2 points. So, for me, this is kind of what I expected from this series. I expect it to kind of go back and forth. I don't think, we're going to know who's going to win this series until Game 7. And I have the Heat winning this series. And I still do, even though Jimmy's, hurt. But I think he's going to be back probably for Game 3. So, like I said, he wasn't in this game. So, what were your thoughts on this one? Because I think this was an interesting one. But, like I said, I think Miami's going to come out of the series. But, this game, I wasn't impressed with Miami.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're in a game where you're without your best player, and you're already kind of shorthanded anyways, right? Because, they've been trying to kind of cobble together, replacements for like Tyler Hero.
Right.
And I think even a couple other guys got hurt in this game. I think Caleb Martin was grabbing at his back. I'm assuming he'll play next game. Strus, I think, got hurt but came back. I mean, but even for most of the game, the Heat were up. They just kind of fell apart in the fourth. I mean, for the Heat, pretty much a lot of it just kind of comes down to the 3-point shooting. They didn't shoot as well from 3 in this game. 34.7%, right? So not too bad.
Right.
Right. A few missed free throws, right? I mean, even though the Knicks missed more free throws, but then also like just in general, right? Like Brunson, was kind of the star in the second half. He had 7 at halftime, was kind of struggling, and then had 23 in the second half. And that was kind of the difference there was like for the Heat, you were kind of just relying on, hoping that a bunch of guys would kind of just step up and hit some big shots. And that's kind of hard to do, and again, when you're without your best player, right, you were kind of hoping Bam would have, a bigger offensive performance, but, 15, 8 and 6, 50%, not bad. But, again, without Butler, you would have liked him to have a little bit more. You got other guys to step up. It just wasn't enough, right? Love wasn't as good this game. So, I mean, I think if you're the Heat, you still have to be okay with the situation because you did what you had to do because you got the split, right? Which is, I mean, I don't know if Butler could have played in Game 2, but I'm assuming they felt comfortable with sitting him because they won Game 1.
Right.
So they won Game 1. They had a chance to win this game, which would have been, for the Heat, it would have been great if they did. But, again, like, just in general, so far this series, like, for most of these playoffs, we haven't really seen a team win the first two. Usually the one team wins one and then the second wins game two. For the most part. So and just in general, right? You also have the Knicks, right? They're in New York. They don't want to go down 2-0. So there's a desperation factor as well. And Randall was back, right? Because he was out for game one. He made a difference. He had a good game. For the most part, right? He's 3 of 9 from three, but everything else, including his passing, was pretty spot on.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
like you said, I do feel like this will probably be a long series. It just kind of all comes down to, again, how healthy is Butler. Um, and can he have a big series, like he did in the first round? Obviously, you're not looking for him to necessarily get 40 a game, but you're looking for him to play well, and then you
Right.
still need other guys to play well, right? Like Duncan Robinson, right, was okay, right, but not a ton from him. And just in general, none of the other bench guys played well. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, Lowry wasn't great. Right, Zeller, they're just kind of trying to cobble up backman or back up big man minutes, but he hasn't really given them much of anything.
Yeah.
So
Can I interject here real quick?
yeah.
In
Mhm.
regards to the health thing, I think that goes for New York too, because I believe there were some questions of health with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson coming into this series. So I think that's a point that needs to be pointed out
Yeah.
as well.
And in fairness, that can really, to be honest, like go for most playoff series, right?
Right. Right.
Because
Right.
somebody gets hurt, that's an important player. That always has some type of effect.
For
So,
sure.
but either way, I think it'll still probably be a long series. But if you're the Heat, you still have to feel good about getting a win in New York.
Right.
It just all comes down to protecting home court if you're Miami. And then if you're the
Yes.
Knicks, obviously you lost one in New York, so that means you got to steal one in Miami.
Yep.
The Knicks are a pretty good road team, so, they have a chance to get one. And again, with Randall back and playing better than he did against Cleveland, that's a good sign. But we'll see. Because like you said, either way, whoever wins, it'll be a long series, I think. I'd be
Yeah.
pretty surprised if it was, like a 5-game series either
I
way.
don't think I
I
don't
think,
foresee that happening. It's got to go
I-
7.
yeah, because I think these are two pretty well matched, really tough teams.
Yeah. I agree. Sorry, my headset was about to die. Um,
Yes.
but I guess to move on, that like we said, we did cover this stuff in the live stream, so we're trying to keep it somewhat brief. But there are some pretty big events that happen in some of these games, and I think this next game is one of the big ones too. And that was the Lakers Warriors game, game one. So this happened on Tuesday. Lakers came away with the win. Away. So the Warriors were at home. Lakers won the game 117-112. And I have the Lakers winning this series. And this is what you want to see if you're a Lakers fan. I feel like you want to see AD have a monster game like this, 30 points, 23 rebounds. That's just perfect domination, pure domination. And they're trying to let them know that we're not Sacramento. You're not gonna be able to bully AD like you bullied Sabonis. I think that's the message that they're sending. LeBron at 22 and 11. I mentioned on the live stream this is kind of underwhelming to me, but we know he can do better. But at the same time, I know the foot issue is a thing that is a factor for sure. But it just proves to you that LeBron doesn't with this squad that they've built past the trade deadline. I think this is proving to be a really good squad where LeBron doesn't have to be under as much pressure as he was during the first leg of the season. And then Austin Reeves, 10 points. Kind of want to see more from him. D'Lo, 19. It's pretty good, but defensively he's not the greatest, so that is a factor as well. And then Dennis Schroeder, 19 points. I think that's pretty good as well. Rui, 6 points. He's kind of quiet. Troy Brown Jr., 3 points. Wenyen Gabriel, 0. But he did have a pretty big factor or a big impact on what they did scheme wise. As a Laker fan, what did you think of this one? Because to be honest, I think the Warriors could have won this game. Just a lot of stuff didn't go their way in terms of shots. And then the Jordan Poole thing is always a factor as well. But like I said, with Lakers fan, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, going in, I thought the Warriors were gonna win the series because I just didn't feel great about the Lakers, road chances in terms because the Warriors have been so great at home, and just in general, like just in terms of the shooting, that's always kind of something that kind of terrifies me for the most part.
Right.
Um, but in fairness, like this game one is kind of the pathway, the blueprint to win the series is that AD has to be dominant on both ends of the floor. And like you said, 30 and 23 rebounds, 4 blocks. And again, even though he had 4 blocks, he did more than that because I mean, a lot of the shots, even if they weren't blocked, he altered them. And it got to a point where like guys around the rim were like completely changing what type of shots they were taking up
Mm-hmm.
because he was there.
Yep.
Like just in terms of like just half a step slow in terms
Right.
of like the way they would go up. So that obviously makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, um, like you said, the Warriors had a chance to win this game. The Lakers built up a 14-point lead, um, late in the fourth quarter, and then they just had a stretch where they couldn't score. And you kind of saw the Warriors make some adjustments and just some bad process and schemes from the Lakers. But overall, coaching staff I thought did a really good job in terms of setting guys up for success. All the X factors that we hit on going into the series, did their part right.
Yeah.
D'Lo was a big one. He had a solid game. Reeves defensively was fine, even though he didn't really do as much scoring. Vanderbilt defensively, it was kind of interesting because going in, I wasn't sure what he was going to do because he's normally more of an on-ball defender, not as much of a guy chasing guys off of screens.
Right.
But he did a good job in terms of limiting Steph. Obviously, Steph still came away with 27, right? But it wasn't easy. A lot of really tough shots. And this was the game that they needed to win, right? Because they ideally, you want to take advantage of the fact that you got time off while the Warriors had a tough 7-game series. So you come out and do what you can to steal game one, right? AD played 44 minutes, right, which is a lot, right? LeBron played 40 minutes.
Right.
Um, so, that's kind of a key thing there, right? I don't think that's going to happen necessarily every game. But
No.
again, like that's the blueprint to win the game. And again, like everything else they needed to do, get a ton of free throws, which they did by getting to the paint. Didn't shoot well from three, but got to the rim. Golden State made a ton of threes, right? But, again, it kind of evened out, right? Because the Lakers got the free throws. The only kind of concern with Golden State is they won the 3-point battle by a ton. Pretty even in terms of rebounding and
Mm-hmm.
turnovers, right? But they still ended up losing the game. So that's kind of a concern. But I still think that there are some adjustments for them to make in terms of like I think they're probably going to try to play small a lot more to kind of space
Right.
guys out and kind of force AD to try to guard on the outside. Of course, I mean they hit 21 threes, but I mean they could always hit more. um,
Easily.
um, and then just in general, I feel like they're gonna try to limit like the Looney Draymond minutes,
Okay.
sort of, because I think with them the issue is that you don't have to guard either of them from the outside. And so like that's kind of how AD was able to camp out in the lane. But either way, like I think this is gonna be a long series. It just kind of comes down to what is AD going to do from game to game? And then LeBron's shooting, right? Because from inside the 3-point line, he's been fine.
Right.
He's actually been pretty efficient from inside the 3-point line. But the problem is from three, his shooting has been really awful. I think he's around like 18%,
Yes.
which is kind of interesting that they've, still been able to win games with him shooting such a terrible percentage from three. You kind of feel like at some point it's going to get at least somewhat better, right? I mean, he's never been like an amazing 3-point shooter, but he's not an 18% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
So like even if he gets to like 30, 32% or something like that, I think he's a career 34 percenter, right? That's going to make a huge difference as well, right? Because if he starts hitting his jump shots, you have to start guarding him a little bit differently, and that can make the Lakers offense, different, right? But for them, it's a defense first team. So, the question is like, can they continue to defend 4 out of 7 times while still getting good performances from the other guys? We'll have to see. I think this is going to be a long series. It looks like it's shaping up to be a great series. I think this is the one that everybody wanted.
Yes.
So I mean, like, you can't ask for a much better second round matchup than this.
Yeah, I get that 100%. And I think you brought up a great point about the Warriors potentially converting to somewhat of a 5-out scheme, because that would literally force AD to have to guard the perimeter. So we could be seeing that. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But like I said with the Warriors, it's just I don't know. They didn't look as strong as they did against Sacramento in game 1. And that's just one game, but I think that's factual. And I guess to move on, we had I think this was probably my favorite game because, and I'm talking about the Philly Boston game. Sorry, I didn't complete my sentence, but yeah.
Yeah.
So what's up? What's up?
Just if I could add one more thing, the
Sure.
Jordan Poole shot, I'm not going to complain too much about it.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, he was open. I mean, it was just too far, but at the same time, with not a whole lot of time left, I just don't really know what else you could have done. Um,
Get the ball to
it's
Steph.
yeah, I mean, I guess, but like, I don't know, just with not a lot of time left on the clock, it's just kind of hard to gauge. Because I think when he missed it, there was like what, maybe
2
3 seconds left.
2.3, I think. Maybe
Yeah, exactly.
3.7.
So
I don't know. It's one of
I don't
those
know.
two numbers.
It wasn't a good shot. I didn't think it was going in at all. But like, I'm not necessarily gonna kill him too much for that. I mean, that was
Right.
probably his best game that he had played in quite some time. Obviously the fouls were an issue, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of throw that
We
out
we
there.
were kind of hard on him in our
Yeah,
live stream. So, yeah,
we were.
we take that back. We don't love the shot, but we also don't, despise it. Um but again, to move on, we're moving into Boston's game. They came out like, I don't know. This team looked crazy. 121-87 against Philly. So they've tied up the series. They were at home again as well. Jaylen Brown had 25 points. Jason Tatum had 7. Al Horford had 5. Derek White, 15. Marcus Smart, 15. Grant Williams, 12 points. Malcolm Brogdon, 23. Robert Williams, 2 points. And Peyton Pritchard, 8 points. And I think this box score just lets you know how deep this squad is. You good?
Yeah, you were frozen for like good 10 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know why, but on my screen I wasn't frozen.
That's good.
Anyways,
Hopefully it doesn't show up in the recording. Go on.
yeah. Anyways, yeah. This just shows you how strong this squad is. I think, and how deep they are. Because, if you look at Philly, it's quite the opposite. You have Tobias Harris, 16 points. PJ Tucker, 5 points. Joel Embiid, 15. James Harden, 12. Tyrese Maxey, 13. D'Anthony Melton, 2. And I mean, it just goes on and on with all these single-digit guys. And this is what you'd want to see if you're Boston. Philly's not deep. We've said this multiple times. We said this early on. This was our major concern with them. Harden's great. Embiid is great. But you can only go but so far with just those two guys. And, just looking at Boston, they're just the better team. Simple as that. And I think really, honestly, I think game 1 was really a fluke. I think they just got complacent. They thought that they could just come out there and, play half-witted and, maybe get away with, winning against Philly without Embiid. But then, now they bounce back and they got the message, we can't half step here. So, with Embiid, they blew them out. So, like I said, I think this is a sign that, this squad is really deep. But, I think the major concern is Jason Tatum. He only played 19 minutes, 7 points. So, what are your thoughts on, the game in total? But I feel like you should start with Jason Tatum.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing was he just got in foul trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
he wasn't necessarily knocking down the shots, but he was great in game 1. So I don't think there's too much concern there. I
Right.
think it's mainly just, and again, they won by like, 50,000 points.
Exactly.
So it's like,
Didn't really need him to play.
yeah, the main key here is like, this is why you have 2 stars, right? You got Tatum and Brown, right? Obviously, they both are great and they're at their best when they're both playing well, right? But then there's going to be times where one of them is kind of struggling, but the other one's playing really well. The key here was in terms of adjustments, right? They put Brown on Harden more. And a lot of the shots that he was hitting in game 1, because again, a lot of them were very contested and very difficult shots, he was not hitting in this game. Again, I wasn't, nobody I don't think should have expected another 35, 40-point game from Harden.
No.
I mean, he hasn't normally consistently done stuff like that in the postseason.
Right.
But again, 45 is a pretty high bar. But to go from 45 to 12, 2 of 14, it's kind of wild. I know he had 10 rebounds, but, just in general, nobody for Philly really played that well.
Right.
And, when nobody plays well, including your stars, that's kind of the recipe for a blowout, right? And then, for Boston, even though Tatum wasn't great, everyone else played really well, right? Marcus Smart had a solid game. Derek White had a bounce back performance. He was awful offensively in game 1, right? Jaylen Brown was better, got more shots, right? Horford couldn't hit a shot, right? But played really good defense. Right, Grant Williams made an appearance off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Brogdon obviously was great off the bench.
Yeah, like
So
20
like you
something.
said, it's kind of just yeah, exactly. So it's kind of just the factor of just having a lot more guys to rely on and go to,
Yeah.
on both ends of the floor.
Yes. That's a huge factor.
And just exactly. And again for Philly, right? Like Embiid came back, right? But you knew obviously he's not at 100%, right? He's got a huge brace on.
Yep.
I mean, he was fine defensively in terms of the shot blocking, but then there were also times where Boston tried to space him out, right? And again, like if he's away from the basket, you don't really have any real rim protection. So, that's kind of a factor as well. So that's kind of the issue with Philly is just that, you need really high level games from a number of guys. And, again, without the depth, it's going to be really hard to beat Boston, in general. But again, they did what they needed to do in game one. I know, like you said, game one almost kind of felt sort of like a semi fluky win.
Right.
Um, but, either way, if you're Philly, you're still probably relatively pleased that, you're going to Philly and the series is tied, right? Obviously it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win the series, right? But either way, you want the series to go as long as possible, right? Because again, you're disadvantaged because you're the lower seed playing against what probably is a better team. So, that's how you have to look at it, right? If you're the lower seed, you got to win one on the road. And, the best time to do it is game one, right? Because like, let's say like in Philly, right? Usually when you're at home, the role players tend to play, at least somewhat better.
For
Um,
sure.
so if you get so if you get, high level games from some of those guys in Philadelphia, then, you might have a chance to probably win, those two games. I don't know. I don't think they're going to win both home games. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost both home games because, again, like you, I do think Boston is better. And again, if Embiid's also going to be hobbled, then they're probably not going to win anyways, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to beat a good team with a lot of depth when your best player is hurt, right? So, I mean, just in general, it's tough if you're Philly, but again, you're satisfied that you got one game in Boston. But I
Yeah.
don't know, game two probably feels closer to what the matchup should be like. I'm not saying Boston's gonna blow out Philly every game because the first half was close. Um, it wasn't like Boston was wire to wire blowing them
Right.
out.
Right. Right. Right.
But just in general, right? Like tonight kind of showed you why Boston's probably the better team, right? Because even with a lousy Jason Tatum game, they still won by almost 40 points,
Exactly.
right? So that's usually the sign that you got a pretty good team when your best player can afford to have a poor, game at least offensively.
Yeah.
Um, still,
Simple as that.
yeah, exactly, and you still win by a ton. So, if you're Boston, I think this is probably a good sign. It just if you're Boston, it probably sucks that you kind of gave away game one because they
Right.
should have won game one. But in my opinion, obviously Harden was great, so he deserves a ton of credit. But Boston also like made a lot of just silly mistakes in terms
Yeah.
of turnovers towards the end of the game as well.
Yeah.
So,
Um. And for me, I think the way that we can look at this series thus far is game one held more weight than game two. Simple as that. Just because of the sheer fact that Philly actually won it in Boston. I think that's what you were trying to get at. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
um, this part we're kind of recording as the Warriors Lakers game two is going on. It's basically like a 30-point game
Yeah.
in the fourth quarter. So I mean we've pretty much figured we might as well just start it early. Obviously, game two, LA versus Golden State. Interesting game in the first half. LA started the end of the first quarter playing relatively well, up 33-26, and then Golden State took over in the second quarter, and from that point on, just just kept hitting shots. LA
Yeah.
made some weird decisions in terms of they played high drop for most of game one, defensively, kind of keeping the shooters at bay, keeping them away from the rim. But then in game two, for whatever reason, they decided to hedge, which I thought was a poor choice, and it allowed
Right.
Golden State to get to the rim more. Of course, Golden State also made some adjustments. First one was to the starting five. They took out Kevon Looney. Apparently, he's sick, so that probably had somewhat to do with it as well. But they took him out and started JaMychal Green, who played pretty well. Um, in his starting minutes. He had 15 points, only run one rebound, but 3 of 6 from three. Um, I thought they might make an adjustment to the starting five because I felt like with the Draymond Looney minutes, it's just not enough shooting. And if you're the defense, you had to find a way to kind of allow AD to be away from the basket.
Right.
So, um, I think for a lot of people, the natural decision may have been to start Jordan Poole or DiVincenzo, but they decided to start JaMychal Green, which I get because he's a bigger body. He can still respectably shoot. Um, so I think that one made a lot of sense there. Obviously, Steph, relatively quiet game. I mean, they played him a little bit in garbage time, which was kind of weird, right? He got a 4-point play. But he didn't really have a big scoring night. It was really Clay had 30, so he was awesome. Draymond Green had almost a triple double, 5 of 10, much better performance on both ends in game two. Wiggins pretty quiet, but still a solid game, 11 points. Um, then off the bench, Poole. I mean, didn't really do a whole lot scoring wise, but again, didn't really need to. Fouled a lot, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
DiVincenzo was solid. Moody was solid in his minutes. Looney came off the bench, still got 6 points, 8 rebounds. That's gonna be kind of an interesting factor, right? Because I wonder if his minutes, will match somewhat of maybe some of the minutes like when AD's not out there. Although AD has played pretty much most of the game. I mean, he played 33 minutes, didn't play at all in the fourth, right? So I mean, he was pretty much only sat for 3 minutes of game time. Um, Going to the Lakers, right? He got a much better shooting performance from LeBron,
Right.
which was kind of interesting because he had struggled for most of the postseason shooting wise. So it was kind of interesting to see him have a bounce back game, even though the Lakers didn't win. Um, just in general, you do kind of wonder if he can carry this type of shooting performance into later games. I think that will help LA offensively, but just kind of a weird game. But in general, we both felt, and I guess also before I get on a tangent, Hachimura had 21 and 5, right? Although again, some of that was a little skewed because some of it was in garbage time, but still,
Yeah.
um, but just in general, I think we both thought the Warriors would win this game. We knew that,
Absolutely.
yeah, we thought that this would be a desperation game. Right. Obviously, they don't want to go down 0-2. They're great at home. It's very rare for them to lose two in a row at home. Can't remember the last time that's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be in a while. But it was kind of interesting how again LA was up early in the game, and then everything just completely fell apart. While AD was great in game one, he was pretty bad in game two. I felt like defensively he was okay. But again, the Warriors' adjustments made it a lot harder for him to get where he needed to go. D'Lo, right, 10 and 8, right. So I mean, okay, right, but not really anything special. Reeves, pretty bad game from him. So just in general, I mean, if you're the Warriors, you got to feel pretty good, right? Obviously, you had a chance to win game one, with that furious comeback, obviously, right? A couple of things go their way, maybe they win, and then you respond with a blowout. Obviously, we'll see what LA does. Bless you, adjustment wise in game three. I think if they look at the film, they'll probably see a lot of stuff that they shouldn't go back to. Like I said, the hedging,
Yeah.
was not really effective at all compared to like the top blocking and the high drop. But just in general, how did you feel about this performance? Because
You
like I said,
know,
I felt like this was kind of coming. Obviously, a 30 point game through 3 quarters is pretty impressive, especially with the way Golden State defended.
right.
But in general, like I don't know, I kind of felt like a blowout performance from Golden State was coming.
Yeah. I think, we both kind of first saw this one happening. And, for me, I'm not a Laker fan, so I mean, maybe I'm not the guy to speak on this, but I feel like when AD doesn't have, a great game, you guys tend to come out there looking a little flat. Same with, even D'Lo. Like when D'Lo's not playing too well, you guys could be a little spotty. So I just feel like we made the right prediction. But I have a question for you, to be honest. As a Lakers fan, or does this worry you? Does this put any heavy burden on you or anything like that? Or because I know you picked the Warriors to win this series, but like I said, as a Lakers fan, does this worry you for your team or not really?
Again, I mean, just in general, I know that oftentimes after wins, they tend to kind of come out flat in the next game.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, a 30-point game through 3 quarters is pretty disappointing, especially considering how they started off. Because they started off okay, because they began the first quarter with a lead, but to start the first, but like then it really quickly went from up 8 to down 11.
Right.
And then from that point on, it just got worse and worse and worse. Again, like in general, obviously the LeBron shooting, if that kind of comes back, then that's solid, right? Because that allows you, a little bit of leeway when it comes to LeBron's offensive performance. Because again, at the rim, he's been fine.
Right.
Pretty much anywhere inside the 3 point line, he had been effective. It had been his 3 point shooting that had been such a huge struggle. It's just I do wonder what adjustments they do to help get AD, some of his rhythm back. Um, because it was just kind of interesting how quickly it went from they couldn't stop him at all to they make adjustments, and all of a sudden you just don't get anything out of him.
Yeah.
Again, like you're not going to win too many games where Anthony Davis has 11 points, and 7 rebounds, right? Like that's in through 3 quarters, right, where he only sits like for 3 minutes. That's again the only way that that happens, right, is if you get really good performances from everyone else, right? Which you're not always. It's not always a guarantee, right? You'd expect more consistent performances from say someone like Anthony Davis than like D'Lo, Reeves, or somebody else like that. So obviously it is kind of concerning. I did pick the Warriors to win the series, but again, like there is a path for the Lakers to win the series, but again, it's just gonna be hard because again, Golden State is a good team. They're gonna hit some ridiculous shots sometimes, so it's also a mental game, right? Because again, they shot 40% from three in game one. In this game, they shot 50% from three, right? And so, like, obviously we can talk about is that really sustainable?
Right.
Probably not. But I mean, like, again, they can easily have stretches where, they go 40, 50% from three in a game, and they've already done it twice. So, for the Lakers, the main thing is their 3-point shooting, I think, also is going to need to kind of come around. It was a little bit better in this game, but
Right.
in general, I don't think they can win 4 out of 7 times shooting like really awful from three. And also in general, right, they lost the rebounding battle. Right, the turnover battle was pretty even. And again, that shouldn't happen if you're the Lakers, right? You got to make adjustments there. It was just kind of odd because it did feel like what they did in game one worked, but again, you knew Golden State was going to make adjustments. You knew they were going to come back with a level of desperation. So again, it's like we talked about what we talked about with the Heat and the Knicks, where you take the split, because again, you're probably not going to beat this team 2 times in a row at home, because they're a really good team. So
Right.
the best you can probably hope for is steal a game, which we talked about before the series began. Preferably steal game one, right? So that way, worst case scenario, you go back to LA and it's tied versus, losing game one, right? And then all of a sudden, right, if you lose again, you're down 0-2, right?
Right.
Which you don't want. So, just in general, I mean, like, you got to take it one game at a time. You just kind of wonder what adjustments are made next game, right? And that's kind of been, again, we talked about it with AD. He is the key to this series, right? Because
I think
in
he's the
general,
one.
he's the guy that they don't really have much of an answer for, but they had an answer for him in this game. And if they figure that out, right, then it's going to be hard for LA to win. Because it worked against Memphis, but I don't think they can beat Golden State if Anthony Davis has like, poor offensive outings where he
Right.
just doesn't get much.
Because
Because he's
Golden
always
State
going
is so good on offense.
yeah, he's always going to give you pretty good defense, I think. But you know, against this team, I think you need more from him on offense. Like I said, I don't think they can win if he's giving you like under 15 a game. You know, like obviously he's not going to average 30 and 20 for an entire series. I think that's pretty unrealistic. But
Right.
somewhere around like 25, 12. I think that's relatively reasonable. And obviously, maybe a couple high end games. Um,
He just needs to be
above that.
dominant.
Yeah, he just needs to. Yeah, what you can't do is he can't be bad, right? At least on, like I said, he's always going to be good defensively, but he's got to be better on offense. And again, that's where the adjustments come in because he's not really um game planned and schemed like a number one go to guy, right? Like
Right.
like they don't the way they run their offense, they don't always like run a lot of their offense through him necessarily. So, which you don't normally see with other, teams like best players or whatever, right?
For
Like,
sure.
like say Joel Embiid or Jokic or Giannis, how many times will they go in a game without like touching the ball on offense? Not a
Right.
lot. So, I think that's part of why you'll see like more up and down games from him because again, they don't run their offense through him like, you see with other stars. But obviously you got to figure out better ways to get him in his best spots because if you don't, you're probably going to lose because I don't see a way they can win the series if he's not really good.
Yeah. Because I feel like I'm not gonna say like LeBron's too old, but I think he's just in this time in his career where he's just not as explosive as he used to be. So he's not able to make those really insane plays and carry a team to victory. Like he can get the job done, but he can't do it by himself anymore. I think that's the point that we're at.
In a game where he was good, right? The team basically got blown out, right?
Exactly.
Game one, he was okay, right? But they ended up winning, right? Because again, you had other guys chip in. So again, that's the key for the Lakers is, AD has to also be really good. And then, like we said, the other X factors have to be there, right? D'Angelo Russell, I don't think can have 10 points. Again, I
It's got to
like the
be around
playmaking.
20.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if 20 necessarily is the answer, but
Really?
uh,
I think it's going to
yeah,
be 20 on efficient shooting, to be honest. You got to take
yeah.
pressure off the guys.
I think it just depends because again, like you kind of also have to look at it from the perspective of like, let's say like LeBron is going to average like 20 something a game, right? I think
Sure.
that probably makes a lot of sense, right? Then you
Sure.
got AD probably going to be at 20 something.
Okay.
Um, to that, like I don't think they're gonna have 3 20-point scorers. Like I would imagine, like you probably have Reeves and D'Lo probably around like 15 apiece.
But
Um,
D'Lo's capable of it, though. And I know you're
well,
not the biggest fan of D'Lo. I get it. But, I would like to see him in that 20-point range, to be honest. Because, like I said, he's playing for that contract. So,
right.
I think that should be the expectation for him,
Yeah.
considering the amount of money that's at stake here. So,
No, I get it. I'm just saying, like I think he could have like a 15 and 8
15
point,
is more
like,
realistic.
yeah,
Sure.
like a 15.8 assist game, and still like, and we can still say he played well, and they can
Sure.
still win, right? Like I don't think they have to get 20 points from him in order to win, but I think they have to get big games from AD in order to win.
Yeah.
Like if Elo has 11 points in a game, like there's a path for them to still win if some other guys step up a little bit more. But if AD has 11 points in a game in this series, I don't see it
It's not a good look.
unless you get like a monster, you know, LeBron game or like, a monster game from like other guys, right? Where they're like really big out. Like if D'Lo has like a 30-point game
Or like
or something.
Hachimura or somebody like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
I get you.
Like yeah, because there were a couple of games in that Memphis series, right, where AD didn't have a great offensive performance, but they still won because other guys chipped in. But I just
Right.
think against this Warriors team, I think the pathway is going to be a little bit different. I don't think you can get away with that in this series because
Exactly.
I think the Warriors. Oh gosh, I think the Warriors are a
You
better
good?
team than. Yeah, just the free throw I saw, but
Oh,
yeah, yeah, but I think this Golden State team, despite them being a 6 seed, I think they're better than Memphis. I think.
sure.
I don't feel like that's necessarily a hot take. Maybe I'm
No,
wrong, but
no, it's not. Memphis was
yeah,
definitely a regular season team. I think that kind of got exposed. So
yeah,
that's
yeah. And
not
I
a
mean, in
hot take.
fairness, like, yeah, and like in fairness, Memphis was missing guys, but I feel like this Golden State matchup is just tougher because of the outside shooting, while still being able to defend. Right, like Memphis, I think is probably a better defensive team, but Golden State is also way better offensively while still being able to defend. Right, it's not like they're the complete opposite where they can score like crazy and can't defend. Like they can
Right.
do both. So, yeah. So I think, but I think we both also thought this was good. Even though we both picked different teams to win, we both think it's going to be a long series. I'd be shocked if it was like a 5 game
If it goes to
series.
7, Warriors got it. But if it's in 6, Lakers.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
Because I think for the Lakers, if they hold home court, then 6 is probably most
exactly.
likely if they hold home court.
Exactly.
Because that's the key for them. Like, because you already got one in the Chase Center. So all you have to do is go to LA, win both games, which again, not an easy task, right? But we know
Hmm.
the Warriors are not a great road team, even though in fairness, they did beat Sacramento twice on the road.
Yes.
But I also think that this Lakers team is better than Sacramento.
Yes, they are.
Um,
More
so,
experience, too.
yeah, yeah. So we'll just have to see. But either way, I think it's going to be a pretty good series.
Yes.
And then I guess now we're doing the look aheads, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I guess looking ahead, we got, a couple of big matchups Friday and Saturday, obviously. As the playoffs, continue to shape up, in the second round. So obviously, as we go on Friday, right, we got a big game, right? You're picked. Oh well, we'll start off with the first one: Celtics Sixers,
Hmm.
right? So that's Friday, Game 3 in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Um, so I think we both thought that Boston was going to win the series.
Yes.
It wouldn't shock me though. I will say, like, I'm not saying like that they're gonna win, but it wouldn't shock me if Philly won this game just because they got demolished. They're at
Right.
home, so they could be better. But at the same time, I do think with the way Boston defended, I think they also, in fairness, have a pretty good shot, and they're also pretty good on the road. I believe they're 25-16 on the road.
Yes.
So, and I think they're looked at as like slight favorites to win the game. I think they're 2-point favorites. So it feels like most people believe that Boston will probably win this game. And again, like, it wouldn't shock me. Like, I think Philly has a chance. It just all depends on, like, Embiid. Like, because again, if he's kind of hobbled, I don't see how Philly's gonna win. I mean, obviously they can win a game, but I don't think they can necessarily win the series if he's not 100%. So I don't know. Who do you think is gonna? Because like I said, I'm really split.
I
So
get you.
like yeah. So I don't necessarily know who I'm leaning towards because like I think Philly's awesome at home, so it wouldn't shock me if the role players stepped up. But I
Okay.
could also see Boston just like again, turning it up on the defensive end and Philadelphia once again struggling to score like they did in the last game. I mean, I guess in fairness, like that was a pretty bad performance by Philly offensively. So
Mm-hmm.
they can be better, right? Like I don't think Harden will have 12 points on terrible efficiency again, but also like you got 45 out of him in game 1, and I don't think we're going to see that again either. So
No.
which version of Harden are we getting? That's also the other key.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrese Maxey also, he wasn't great. I mean, nobody was really great for Philly in game 2. So that's kind of the question. Do we think that Philly will have a bounce back game at home in front of the Philly fans, or are they going to probably lose again?
Here's what I'll
What are your
say.
thoughts?
I think they're going to have a bounce back game, but they're still going to lose, if that makes sense. So I think they're going to play significantly better than what we saw in game 2, but it's still not going to be enough because I'm probably going to, if I had to bet on it, I would probably put all my chips on Jaylen Brown having a monster game. I don't know why. That just feels like it's in the air for me. So I think he's going to have a great game. Boston's going to rally around and probably, win in like a smaller point differential. So, probably around like maybe that 2 to 10
It'll
10
be a
point.
close.
Yeah, it's going to be closer. It's not going to be 40. I don't foresee another blowout like that happening. But I'm still taking Boston just because they're that good. Simple as that. I'm taking the favorite.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's probably where I'm leaning towards, where I think it'll be a close game.
Yeah.
And again, seems like there's slight favorites to win game 3, which makes
Right.
sense. They're the better team and
Yeah.
they're really good on the road. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then moving into game 3 for Nugget Suns, right? Suns were your pick to come out of the West. Game
Yep.
3 in Phoenix.
Yep.
Um, they are looked at as 4-point favorites, which is kind of interesting. I would have thought it would have been closer to 2. Um, I do think that Phoenix has a chance to win this game, and I'm leaning towards they probably will. I think you'll get a bounce back game from Durant. I think you'll continue to get a huge game from Booker. I think at home, down 2-0, I think you'll see a couple of role players that didn't play well in Denver show up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that there is potential for Denver to win this game. But again, also we have to factor in no Chris Paul. That hurts Phoenix as well because that hurts the depth. But I do think you'll get a bounce back game from the Suns. And you're going to have to get a bounce back game from the Suns, right? Because again, like, if they lose this game, the series is done. So I think that they will win game 3 just because I expect a lot of guys who played poorly to have better performances
Right.
while, still getting a great performance from Booker as well.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm taking Phoenix to win this one, but I'm also predicting Durant's probably gonna have like a 40-point game. That's just the kind of game that he needs to have. It'll help boost the morale, everything, and the team will rally around him. And I think they can really get this thing done. I know they're down, but at the same time, they could easily steal two, or not steal, but win both of their home games and even the series up, and then we're right back in business. So that wouldn't surprise me. I have faith in this team. I have faith in my pick. I'm going to stand by it. So yeah, once again, Durant explodes for probably a really big game in a win for the Phoenix Suns. Because I think and to be fair, I think I don't know who's going to step up for them in the point guard position. I don't know if it's going to be Campaign or what, but I do have faith in Campaign because he was a key factor in their finals run, but I don't know. It all comes down to who's going to be playing in this game. But once again, Durant, he's going to go off, I think.
And even if he doesn't have a 40-point game, like I think there's easily a world where like both he and Booker still combine for like
Sure,
you know
like
35
70.
apiece. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think there's a world where like they both have explosive performances because that's the other key too, right? Because I think it's gonna be like because I think they also need Devin Booker to play really well as well. I don't
Yeah.
think like it's just Durant. Like I think they're probably still gonna lose,
Right.
even if like there's a world where he has 30-40, but everybody else plays poorly. Uh, and they still lose. So I think you'll get big games from both of them.
Sure, great point.
Combined, like I said, with a couple of role players. I don't know if it'll be Cameron Payne. I don't know if it'll be Damian Lee. But just at home, I do believe role players tend to show up more. So I think they'll win game 3. I do think it's going to be really tough to win 4 out of 5 without
Yeah,
Chris Paul. I think it is possible, but it has to start obviously with this game. This is a
I agree.
must-win game for Phoenix. This is the biggest game of the season for them, right? So you kind of right. So you got a lot of chips on the table, right? Because again,
Season's on the line with this one.
yeah, they made the trade for Durant, so now it's kind of time for him to show, right? Like this
Right.
is why you traded for me. So, but I do think Phoenix will win this game. So we'll start off with the news. So I guess we'll roll it off with Coach Bud, right? Mike Budenholzer from Milwaukee,
Mm-hmm.
fired. So he is out. They only won the title a couple of seasons ago. This is, I believe, what, the third head coach that was fired after winning a title.
Yeah.
Because we go back to Frank
Vogel,
Vogel, who won,
Nurse,
Nick Nurse for
and now
Toronto,
Bud. Yeah.
now Bud.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the only championship coach that's left, in terms of recent memory, is Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a rough, position to be in. Obviously, we talked about it. After Milwaukee lost, right? I think he did make some really poor decisions,
Yeah.
in terms of not using his timeout at the end of I think it was game 5, right? Yeah, not using his
Mm-hmm.
timeout at the end of game
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
in overtime or in the fourth quarter. Um, not making adjustments in terms of doubling Jimmy Butler, putting somebody else on him other than Drew Holiday. But then also we had some news that his brother died in a car crash during the series,
Right.
so I'm sure that kind of weighs, on your mind as well, right? Because these are high level games, right? And you have to be really focused. And I'm sure when you're in a situation like that, sometimes your mind is just gonna kind of just kind of drift off, thinking to think about things beyond basketball. But at the same time, it felt like it was probably coming because just in general, right? Like, I understand what Giannis says, and I think that there is some merit and truth to what he says, but I also think that the season was a failure.
Okay.
And obviously, in general, right? Like, you're not usually going to get rid of the players first, right? Usually it's the coach that's the one to
It
go.
always starts
Um,
at the head.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting to look back, right? Because, there were talks about Bud being fired, had they come up short against Brooklyn the year they won the title.
Right.
And then we had a lot of factors going in there, right? Brooklyn had the injuries, right? You had the thing with Durant's foot, on the line. So I mean, just in general, I mean, you do kind of wonder because like the way that those last 2 Bucks losses looked, it felt like the Bucks team of old, where they were a really good regular season team, but then
Right.
would kind of come up short
I get that.
in the postseason. Again, I still think Milwaukee will be really good. I still think Giannis is awesome, right? But that one's I think, gonna sting, and it's gonna hurt for a while because I mean that's pretty tough to lose to the Miami Heat in 5 games. But I do kind of wonder now, what they're gonna do in terms of like, who's the next person up,
Right.
who's available, right? We talked about some of the previous coaches getting hired, um, and I mentioned like say Udoka who took the Houston job, and in my mind, I feel like he should have waited to take another one. And again, I understand the concept of like you got to wait for well not wait, you got to take the opportunities when they
Right.
come to
Right.
you,
Right. Right.
right? Not necessarily like just say like no thanks, I'm just gonna wait because the next opportunity may not come. But like if I'm Udoka, right, I would have 1,000 times preferred Milwaukee,
Right.
Houston, just because you're coaching a superstar. Right, you have a chance to contend for a title every year. But, again, just in general, right? Like, I mean, again, you don't know what's going to happen, so you can't necessarily just say no.
Right.
Right. Obviously, this situation was pretty different, right? Just in terms of the personal stuff. But, I do kind of wonder who's next. This may be the Nick Nurse destination,
It could
because
be.
he was,
I
yeah,
wouldn't be mad at that.
yeah, because he was a name that had come up, of course, for, a lot of teams. But I feel like this is probably the Nick Nurse situation, right? I mean, he was
Right.
the coach for a championship team. I think he showed he was a really good coach.
Yeah. For
But I
sure.
do wonder, right? It is always interesting. And again, like we talked about it. I don't know if both of us said he should have been fired, but we were talking about like it, it,
Right.
it would be possible. Because
Um.
again, it'd be hard to have a situation like that and not have somebody get punished for it.
Yeah, I get that, and that's kind of what we were hinting at. We didn't say it was all on him, but he did need to take accountability. I was more on the end of like, it wouldn't surprise me if they fired him, but I didn't think they needed to. He did have some fireable offenses, I can't lie. But, this is interesting to me because, and, first I want to address the Udoka thing that you said. I feel like if Udoka didn't have the situation that he had, he could approach it a little bit differently and actually have waited. But since his situation occurred, he kind of had to take what he could, at the time. So I think that's the right mentality to look at that. But, in terms of Bud, it's just interesting because, and even Dame commented on it. He was like, so we're just firing guys who won championships nowadays. And it's like, I get it because I feel like the Warriors kind of messed everything up when they, created their dynasty. It kind of became a trend, or not a trend, but I don't know. It feels like there's some sort of trend in like the ownership and coaching realm of basketball where it's like if you don't consistently go back to the finals or have appearances or titles or something like that, then you're deemed as the problem as the coach, which I find very interesting because I feel like we have to talk about the fact that Giannis was hurt. Middleton was also coming off of an injury. He was just trying to get back into himself. And then it's also Jimmy Butler. There's just some things that you can't control. So I get both sides here. I think that the fact that they fired him this quickly is interesting. I think it would have been interesting if they had fired him even quicker or if they had fired him later. I just think this is a weird time to fire somebody, Like, obviously after getting eliminated. I just think that's kind of weird, but that could just be me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand that. It is kind of because we had, but it is interesting because then you look back, right, and around the start of playoff time, or we had some coaches fired, right, because Nurse was out,
Mm-hmm.
Casey was out for Detroit, and then obviously Silas was out. So it is kind of interesting how like in the middle of the playoffs this happens, but
Right.
for the teams that aren't in the playoffs, right, and now Milwaukee is not, right, now is pretty much their off season.
But it's like they
So
didn't.
a
It
lot of
just seems like they didn't take enough time to evaluate. I don't know. I understand the firing, but I don't necessarily like it. If that makes sense, that's the kind of point of
right.
view that I have on it.
Yeah, no, I get it. It is kind of weird, but but again, like now that it is the off season, you do kind of have to gauge, like,
I get it.
where we at, as a team. And it is going to be interesting with Milwaukee, right? Because, even though they should still be really good, then you have to factor in some of the other guys, right? Like Holiday's, I think, 32. Middleton, right, is coming off injuries. So you do kind of wonder, is he going to be quite the same?
Right.
And then after that, right, Lopez, I think, is going to be, what, 34, 35?
They're
So he's
getting up
obviously
there.
going to be older. Yeah, exactly. I mean, his game has translated well, as he's aged, but just in general, right? Like, I mean, he's not going to be the starting center for the next 4 or 5 seasons for
Right.
Milwaukee. I do kind of wonder, where this team is headed, right? Because again, like, that's a pretty deflating, postseason trip. But like you said, in fairness, right, they had some extenuating circumstances with the injury. So, that's why I thought that there was kind of a world where maybe he doesn't get fired. But at the same time, like, eh, I
Yeah.
understand it, right? Like, it is kind of weird though, because it is funny, like when you talk about the championship coaches getting fired. In a couple of situations, like, were different, right? Because like with Nick Nurse, he had Kawhi, right, and then he was gone, so you weren't going to be the same great team year after year, anyways.
Right.
Um, and then in Vogel's case, right, his roster, his last year was completely different, right? Because his roster, the year they won the title, and I guess for the most part the year after, was a roster that was pretty catered to his strengths as a coach. And then his last year as coach, right, the roster was very different. But yeah, just in general, right? Like, I mean, the coaches are usually going to get the first, piece of the blame pie, right, in the front office, right? The GM's not going to fire themselves for putting together a bad roster. And obviously, the players for the most part aren't going to go anywhere unless
Right.
they're free agents. So, it always is kind of a weird time, but this was something where it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I get
Yeah.
that 100%.
Yeah. And then moving on, Joel Embiid obviously was announced as the league MVP. Um, this was, I think, expected for the most part, right? I mean, it felt like he had kind of wrapped it up towards the end of the regular season. Obviously, you had your other candidates, right, like Jokic, right? But with Denver, the issue for them was they coasted a lot during the second half of the season. And I think they also sat him for a while. And then for Giannis, right, he had a chance as well because they had the best record, but he also missed a lot of games. So obviously it kind of just felt like it was gonna be Embiid's turn. He had a really good season. For me, like I feel like this feels right in the sense of like, you have Giannis who's got a couple MVPs. You got Jokic who's got a couple MVPs, and then you got Embiid with one, and it feels like those three guys have probably been, at least in the regular season, your three best players, just from a performance standpoint from night to night. So, I mean, just in general, how are you feeling about this one? I know Embiid was not your pick for MVP, but I'll let you kind of go
Yeah,
into the
it's the
weeds
biggest
with
piece.
it.
I'm kidding. It's not the biggest piece. But here's what I'll say about this. Look, I think I'm not gonna lie. This is one of the first pity MVPs that I think I've ever witnessed in my life. Because I'm telling you that the impact that Jokic brings to the Nuggets is better than the impact that Embiid brings to the Sixers. Like, if you think about it, like I'm pretty sure Embiid missed like what 15 or 14, or I think it was like 15 or 14 games, right?
Something like that. I don't have
And
the number.
when they play without him, they're a lot better. It's the complete opposite with Jokic. And like I said, I like to look at the MVP in how well you impact your team, you know? So this is not a good pick for MVP for me. Like I said, I would prefer Jokic. I think he's doing things that we've never really seen before. Embiid is okay. I've always thought of him as overrated. Very odd pick for me personally. And then and this is the stark contrast. This is what I'm talking about. And I'll give you. I know the playoffs are a different breed, different animal. Don't really want to compare it, but I'm just giving people an example of a recent example of what I'm talking about. So they play without Embiid, right? And then they beat Boston, alongside a great Tatum game. But then now he's back. I know he was injured, but he's still on the court, right? This is y'all's MVP, right? So your MVP is on the court, and he only drops what, 15 points? I know, injuries, but he only dropped 15 points and they lost by 40. Like, this is what I'm talking about. The voter fatigue is real with this award. It's unfortunate. I already knew they weren't going to give Jokic 3. There's no shot they were going to do that. And I think it would have been what? Would it have been back to back to back?
Yeah, it would have been three
Yeah,
straight.
he wouldn't have gotten a three-peat, not on MVP. He'll probably get 3 MVPs or more, but he's never going to win 3 in a row. I think that's the problem. And I'm telling you, it's the voter fatigue. People are tired of the same evidence, which is dumb. It's the dumbest thing that I've ever seen. And I'm sorry to come off as an Embiid hater, but I hate the fact that he won this MVP because Jokic is better. Simple as that. And that's really all I have to say on this. It's disappointing for me. But yeah, not a big fan of this at all. And I've kind of been holding my tongue on it, to be honest. But that's all I have to say on it. Not a fan.
All right, so I guess you'll be more of a fan of this one. So we talked about this kind of in the live stream. So Dillon Brooks,
Uh-huh.
according to Shams Charania, it sounds like under no circumstances will he be a Memphis Grizzly again. Kind
Uh-huh.
of a weird scenario where you don't normally see this type of reporting. I mean, sometimes I feel like I've seen reporting in the past where like it'll be a scenario where like a team isn't sure about bringing somebody back
Right.
necessarily, but not like a for sure definite under no circumstances. That feels like a little bit harsh. And it
Yeah.
almost kind of feels sort of scapegoatish from the perspective of like it's his fault that we lost the series, even though,
Memphis even said that too.
yeah, even though like it's a team effort, right? One person doesn't normally lose you an entire series. Um, but at the same time, I talked about it after the Grizzlies got eliminated, where it felt like, he's a free agent. I think he hurt himself, with his comments that he had, as well as his poor play.
Yeah.
Um, and I said that there was a world where like, he doesn't come back as a Grizzly. We saw a little bit of damage control, right? There was a report that had come out later that said that he was offered multiple times extensions and he didn't take it. Um, and then I believe there was also another report that said that the Grizzlies were like not happy that
That's
the
what I
way
was
that
talking
was
about,
it
yeah.
came out. Yeah, and then also I think Dillon Brooks' agent came out
And
and
attack
criticized
Shams.
Shams for,
Yeah.
yeah, attack Shams. So just kind of a bizarre situation, just in general. But I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily know where he's gonna go. I mean, we talked about it in the live stream. It feels like he'll probably be a guy where like that goes to a team, right, that has cap space, misses out on star players, and is like, you know what? We may not have gotten Harden or Middleton or Jalen Brown, but we'll get Dillon Brooks.
I.e., a team
So
that sucks.
yeah, like I said, maybe like a Houston, or somebody like that. But just in general, I mean, like I don't know, because again, I think he does have value as a defensive player. Obviously, his
Sure,
offense is really spotty. In terms of his efficiency, right? It comes and goes. Um,
sure.
but I do think like there's a place for him on a team, but I don't necessarily know. I definitely don't know if it's as a starter.
Hell no.
Just because I don't like the efficiency numbers, but I don't know. I mean, obviously any team could always use some size, some defense, some attitude, but I do think in general he hurt himself because if I were him, ideally I'd probably prefer to stay on, as a part of this Memphis core. But, it probably is time for both sides to move on.
Yeah. Um, I don't really have too much to say on this. You covered all the points, but for me, I don't think, Shams is in the wrong here at all. He's just doing his job. He's just doing what was told to him. He reported on it. Simple as that. Dylan Brooks' agent should be mad about who even said that in the first place. That's what needs to be talked about. And then, Memphis is doing damage control, like you said, saying that they're upset about how it came out. There's just too many things that are going on here, and I don't want Shams to be caught in the middle of it, unfortunately, because it seems like Shams does, his due diligence and does his work very well. And, he's an honorable journalist, I think. But, I just find it hard to believe that Shams is putting out false information. I know we do live in a time where, people do some wild things for clicks, but that doesn't, Shams doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. But, the Dylan Brooks camp does for sure. So, it's just a weird situation. And like you said, Brooks basically got fired. Like, simply as that. Like, on the internet, he got fired. They said, under no circumstances. That means you're not coming back ever. As long as the management or ownership is the same or whatever. So, he won't be back, which is, I think, a good move. Um, because, at the same time, he doesn't help you out too much. But he does hurt you sometimes. So I think they weighed their options and were like, yeah, this guy shot his mouth off way too much, and he didn't have the play to back it up. So we don't tolerate that here in the locker room. And I'm sure the coach also had a say in that as well, because that could get toxic. So I'm not going to say I'm glad for this to happen, but I think it was time that they did part ways because it had been 6 years. So
And then to wrap it up, Monty McNair, GM for the Sacramento Kings. He was named the executive of the year. Obviously, we had talked about it, on end for most of the season, right? Sacramento's turnaround, right, as a team that had been kind of a perennial punchline for about as long as we can remember, right? I mean, like, because again, I think prior to this year, it had been, I think, what, 17 years since they had made the playoffs, something
yeah,
like that. But obviously, they finally break through this season, and have a great regular season, winning 48 games, right? Taking the defending champs to the first round. Also, in fairness, I think that there were also, other candidates that I think had the opportunity to win as well. But I don't necessarily have too many complaints. Well, not really too many. I don't really have any complaints with who they chose here. I mean, how are you feeling about this one?
I like it. He brought this team from like you basically said they used to be a joke, and now they're out from the depths of hell. They were they were a good seed this year, so I think this is something that is well deserved for him because I mean I feel like the Sabonis trade worked out, and then he also drafted Keegan Murray. I think it's just all coming together in the right time. And I think, like we've said multiple times, their future is bright. So if your future is bright, you're doing something right on the executive side. The only way they can mess it up is if they let people go that are cornerstones of their offense, defense, or the franchise in general. So, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think the only thing that's going to happen is they can build on this roster and come back better, stronger, faster, whatever the case may be. Just fill out their needs. So, I think this is the GM that's clearly proved that he's capable of that. Because, like I said, their trades and their rookies have worked out. So, no contest from me.
Yeah, and going down the rest of the list, Kobe Altman for Cleveland in second place, right?
Okay.
Obviously pulling off the Donovan Mitchell trade.
Yeah.
You got Utah in third, right? Obviously getting back, a lot of pieces for Gobert and for
Right.
Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
Calvin Booth for Denver.
Okay.
Right. I guess that's probably the KCP Bruce Brown moves. I guess I don't
Probably.
necessarily know if that should be top
I
five,
don't think
but I
that's
think
top five.
yeah. Brad Stevens fifth for Boston, getting Malcolm
I like that.
Brogdon. I think yeah. John Horst for Milwaukee. I mean, this is a regular season award, so we're not going to say a whole
Yeah.
lot,
I
but
mean, it was a good team though. They were really
yeah.
scary until Giannis went down. But
James Jones, sixth or I guess seventh place, right? Getting Kevin Durant, right?
okay,
So
I'll
makes
take
sense.
that.
Leon Rose for New York, obviously Jalen Brunson,
Right.
Zach Kleiman for Memphis,
Okay.
Sean Marks for Brooklyn, Rob
Okay.
Pelinka 11th for LA. I feel like that should be a little higher, but I
Oh yeah,
also
for sure.
understand.
Due to the trade deadline.
Yeah, but I also understand the thought process of, well, you also kind of helped put together the team that started off 2 and
Yeah,
10, but
you
I
did
feel like
put them in
11th
that
might be
hole.
a little. Sam Presti, I also feel like is at 12th is kind of low
Mm,
because that team became a play-in team
right.
when everybody thought it was going to be a bottom five roster. So I feel like that should probably be higher.
For sure.
Um, then Daryl Morey for Philly. I mean, I
Okay.
guess they got DeAnthony Melton. I
That's
guess
so. That roster's so thin. I don't
Tucker,
even like that.
and then David Griffin for New Orleans. I guess, but they had a lot of injuries. But and then
Yeah.
last place, or not last place, but last on this top list is Tim Connolly for Minnesota, who put together the lovely Gobert trade.
For
So
some reason, I thought you were going to say Tommy Shepard, and I was like, please, no more Ernie Grunfeld Jr. content. He's done,
no,
please.
it was so that's kind of weird. I would not have thought that he would have been anywhere on that list.
Me
But,
neither.
regardless, yeah, I don't have too many problems with this list. I mean, like there are some people that I think should probably be moved around a little bit, but I
They
don't
made
have
the
a
right
problem
pick
with
for number one.
yeah, I think that was fine. All right, so I guess that pretty much wraps up our podcast again, as we continue to talk about the playoffs, these podcasts are going to be more long format just because again, a number of games to cover. In fairness, right, as the playoffs, get closer to ending when we have fewer games to talk about, right, the length will probably be shorter. But
Yeah.
just in general, we appreciate everybody sticking around as we cover what's been a great postseason. So again, our last couple of shorts did really well, so we want to thank everybody for the support that we got. I believe our short on the Milwaukee Bucks got a record for this channel, 800 views.
Yeah, let's go, man. Shout out you
Exactly.
guys, man. It's not possible without you guys.
Yeah, and we've gone up to 27 subscribers, right? So we've gotten 2 in the last couple of weeks. So again, we continue to appreciate the support. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.